I've been invisible for so long that I almost forgot I was ever seen. My name is Lillian Hart, and I'm 73 years old. Lived in the same house for 40 years, raised 3 children, buried 1 husband, and watched my family grow into something I no longer recognize. But today is different. Today I'm going to tell you about the moment I remembered I was worth seeing. It started on a Tuesday morning in October. The maple tree outside my kitchen window was burning orange, dropping leaves like scattered prayers across the yard. I stood at my vanity, brushing my silver hair with the same ivory brush my husband Harold had given me on our wedding day. 100 strokes, just like always. In the mirror, I could see the photograph on my nightstand, Harold and me on our 30th anniversary. His arm around my waist, both of us laughing at something I can't remember now. "Today's the day, Harold," I whispered to the empty room. "Our annual family photo." The tradition started 23 years ago when my eldest son David got married. I wanted something to mark the passage of time, to capture us all together before life scattered us like autumn leaves. Every year since then, we've gathered at my house, though they all seem to forget that for a professional photo shoot. I've watched babies become toddlers, teenagers grow taller than their fathers. Watched my family tree branch and flourish. I chose my best blouse that morning, the periwinkle blue one that Harold always said brought out my eyes. My hands shook slightly as I fastened the tiny pearl buttons. Arthritis, the doctor said, but I know better. My hands shake when I'm nervous. When I'm hoping for something I'm not sure I'll get. In the kitchen, I mixed batter for blueberry muffins. The photographer would arrive at 2, and I wanted to have something special waiting. The measuring cups clinked against the ceramic bowl, a familiar rhythm that steadied my breathing. I'd made these same muffins for every family gathering for decades. Sarah, my daughter-in-law, used to ask for the recipe. She stopped asking about 3 years ago. The phone rang while the muffins were in the oven. "Mom." It was David's voice, distracted and hurried. "About today, we're running a little late. The photographer might get started without us." "Without you?" I clutched the phone tighter. "But it's a family photo, dear." I know. Just ... Maybe you could get your solo shots done first. That way, when we arrive, we can jump right into the group shots." Solo shots. As if I were separate from the family instead of its foundation. Of course, I heard myself say, "Whatever works best." After he hung up, I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by the smell of baking muffins and the weight of something I couldn't quite name. Through the window, I watched a cardinal land on the bird feeder Harold had built for me. Stayed for just a moment before flying away, a flash of red against the gray sky. The photographer arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. James Morrison, the same man who'd been capturing our family for 15 years. He used to greet me with a warm hug and ask about my garden today. He barely looked up from his equipment. "Mrs. Hart," he said, setting up his lights in the living room, "I understand we're starting with your individual portraits." "Yes," I said, smoothing my skirt. "Would you like some coffee?" "I made muffins." "I'm good, thanks. Let's get you positioned by the fireplace." I stood where he directed, my back straight, hands folded. The mantelpiece behind me held decades of family photos, birthdays, graduations, holidays, my life in frames. "Smile for me," James said, but he was checking his camera settings, not looking at me. I smiled anyway. I've been smiling on command for so long that my face knows the shape of it, even when my heart DOESN. Single quotes, T, click, click. "Great, that's perfect. We'll just wait for the others now." I sat on the couch, watching him adjust his equipment. The muffins cooled on the kitchen counter. The cardinal returned to the feeder, pecked at the seeds, flew away again by 3:30. I heard car doors slamming in the driveway. Voices, laughter, the sound of my family arriving. My heart lifted despite everything. David came in first, looking harried, his tie slightly askew. Behind him, Sarah in her perfectly pressed dress, her smile bright and brittle. Then my grandchildren's 16-year-old Emma with her phone already in her hand. 12-year-old Tyler dragging his feet, and little Sophie, only 7. The one who still sometimes climbed into my lap during movies. "Sorry we're late, Mom," David said, kissing my cheek quickly. Traffic was insane. "Grandma Lily." Sophie ran to me, and for a moment everything felt right again. Her small arms around my neck, the scent of her strawberry shampoo, the way she still called me by the pet name she'd invented when she was 3. "Did you bring muffins?" Kaylor asked, already heading toward the kitchen. "They're on the counter, sweetheart." Sarah was talking to the photographer, gesturing toward the living room. "I think we should do the formal shots first, then maybe some casual ones in the kitchen?" "Absolutely," James agreed. "Let's get everyone positioned." What followed was a dance I knew by heart. The photographer arranging us like pieces on a chessboard, tallest in back, shortest in front, adjust the angles, watch the lighting. But something was different this year. I found myself consistently moved to the edges, squeezed out of the center frame. "Emma, can you move closer to your mom?" James called out. "Tyler, put your arm around Sophie." Perfect. I stood at the far right, my hand resting on the back of the couch. In the viewfinder, I could see our reflection in the mirror. Across the room, a family portrait with grandmother as an afterthought. "Beautiful," James said. "Let's try a few more." We shifted and rearranged. It's time I seemed to drift further from the center. My children and grandchildren chatted and laughed, but their conversations flowed around me like water around a stone. "Oh, I love that one," Sarah said, looking at the camera's display. "Can we do one more just like it?" "Actually," Emma said, lowering her phone for the first time all afternoon, "can we try something different?" She was looking at me, but not really seeing me. It's the way you look at furniture when you're considering rearranging a room. "What did you have in mind?" James asked at Emma, glanced at her parents, then back at me. There was something in her expression, not malice. Exactly. But a kind of thoughtless cruelty that only teenagers can master. "Maybe we could do one without Granny?" She said, "Just the real family." The words hung in the air like smoke. Just the real family. As if 40 years of scraped knees kissed better, Christmas mornings orchestrated, birthday cakes baked. Bedtime stories read aloud as if none of that made me real. The room went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a family at peace, but the sharp, brittle quiet of broken glass. I looked at my son, at my daughter-in-law, at my other grandchildren, waiting for someone to speak up, to say what everyone was, thinking that Emma had gone too far, that this was cruel, that I was family in the truest sense of the word. Instead, Sarah cleared her throat. "Well, it might be nice to have some shots of just the nuclear family, ... double quotes." David nodded slowly. "Sure, that makes sense." Tyler shrugged. Sophie looked confused but didn't protest. And just like that, I was edited out of my own family portrait. Course, I heard myself say. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from someone else's mouth. It's a lovely idea. I stepped out of the frame. Literally stepped backward, out of the rectangle of light where my family stood. I found myself next to the photographer, watching through his lens as my children and grandchildren rearranged themselves to fill the space I'd left behind. "Perfect," James said, and I wondered if he meant the lighting or the fact that I was no longer in the way. Click, click, click. I stood there, invisible, watching them smile for the camera, watching them look happy, complete, without me. "Beautiful," James said. "I think we got some great shots." The session ended shortly after that. Equipment was packed away. Goodbyes were said, promises to see each other soon were made. Sarah took a container of muffins for the road. Emma never looked at me again. When the last car pulled out of my driveway, I stood in my empty living room, surrounded by the photographs of my life. The silence was so complete I could hear the old house settling around me, the whisper of wind through the window frames. The distant tick of the grandfather clock Harold had brought home from an estate sale 30 years ago. I walked to the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. The muffin sat on the counter, barely touched. I took one, crumbled it in my hands, and scattered the pieces outside for the birds. That night, I climbed the stairs to Harold's study. Hadn't been up there in months, the steep steps were harder. On my knees now, and the room held too many memories. But tonight, I needed to remember something. Harold's desk was exactly as he'd left it when he died 3 years ago. His reading glasses folded on top of a book about Civil War history. His coffee mug still stained brown around the rim. It's good on. And in the bottom drawer locked away in a metal box. The papers I'd never needed to look at. My hand shook as I opened the lock with the key he'd shown me years ago. Inside, our marriage certificate, the children's birth certificates, insurance policies, and at the bottom, a manila envelope with my name written in Harold's careful script. I'd forgotten about the envelope. He'd given it to me shortly before he died. Told me to open it only if I ever needed to remember who I was. Inside was a copy of the deed to our house. But not the original deed from when we'd bought it in 1983. This one was dated just 2 years ago. Shortly after Harold's first heart attack, the Hassall 4 acres of IT had been quietly transferred into my name alone. There was also a letter, written in Harold's handwriting. My dearest Lillian, if you're reading this, then you've found yourself in a place I always feared you might end up. You've always been too generous with your heart, too willing to put others' needs before your own. It's one of the things I love most about you, and the thing that worries me most. You gave 40 years of your life to raising our children, to building a home, to creating the foundation that everyone else stands on. You are not the frame, Lily. You are the picture itself. I've made sure the house is yours completely and legally. I've also included a clause in my will that protects your inheritance from anyone who publicly disrespects or diminishes you. It was my lawyer's idea, actually. He said he'd seen too many families take advantage of the matriarch's kindness. If they ever make you feel invisible, remind them who built the frame. All my love, Harold. I read the letter 3 times. Harold's. Words blurring through my tears. In the margins, he'd written additional notes. Phone numbers for his lawyer, instructions for accessing accounts I didn't even know existed, and a list of organizations he thought might benefit from our estate, if our family ever proved unworthy of it. The next morning, I called Harold's lawyer. Mrs. Hart, Robert Chen, said when his secretary put me through. I was wondering when you might call. Harold told me you probably would someday. I need to understand something, I said. About the will, of course. Which part? The clause. About ... about disrespect. Robert's voice grew gentle. Your husband was very specific about that. He said you'd sacrifice too much for your family to ever be treated as less than the cornerstone you are. The clause states that any heir who publicly diminishes or disrespects you forfeits their claim to any part of the estate. And yesterday, if someone suggested I wasn't real family, that would certainly qualify, particularly if it was done in front of witnesses. I closed my eyes, thinking of James Morrison and his camera, capturing not just images, but proof. So what would happen to their inheritance? It would be redistributed according to your wishes. Harold left that entirely up to you, I see. It's Mrs. Hart. May I ask what prompted this call? I told him about the photo shoot, about Emma's words, about the way my family had stood by and watched me be erased from their picture. Robert was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry, Mrs. Hart, but I'm not entirely surprised. Harold saw this coming, you know? He loved your children dearly, but he was worried about what would happen to you after he was gone. What do I do now? Whatever you think is right. The power is entirely in your hands. I hung up and sat in Harold's chair, looking out at the garden we'd planted together. The roses were dormant now, cut back for winter. But I could already see the tiny green buds that promised spring. It took me 3 weeks to make my decision. 3 weeks of normal. Phone calls with my children, normal conversations about weather and work and the kids' activities. 3 weeks of pretending that nothing had changed, that I hadn't been carved out of my own family portrait like a cancer. But I was thinking, planning, remembering. I remembered the Christmas morning when Sarah had criticized my cooking in front of the whole family. "Mom's stuffing is always so bland," she'd said, laughing. "I brought my own this year." I remembered the graduation party when David had introduced me to his colleagues as the babysitter instead of the grandmother. It was meant as a joke, but I'd seen the way they looked at me afterward, like hired help instead of family. I remembered last Easter when Tyler had rolled his eyes and said, "Do we have to listen to another one of Grandma's boring stories?" No one had defended me then, either small cuts, all of them. But small cuts can bleed you dry if there are enough of them. The Monday before Thanksgiving, I made my calls. First, to Robert Chen. "I'd like to invoke the clause in Harold's will." "All of them, Emma." "Yes." "David and Sarah, ... I need to think about that." "But Emma, definitely." "That's your granddaughter?" "Yes. The one who suggested I wasn't real family." "I'll drop the paperwork. Her share will be held in trust until you decide how to redistribute it." Next, I called the Riverside Women's Foundation, an organization that helped older women who'd lost their homes or their families. Harold had supported them quietly for years. Mrs. Hart, the director, Margaret Walsh, said when I explained why I was calling, "Are you sure about this?" "I'm sure. The house has been in my family for 40 years. It's time it helped other families." Is incredibly generous. "When were you thinking of making the transition?" "After the holidays. I'd like one last Christmas here." "Of course. We'll make sure you have a beautiful apartment in our senior living community. You'll be surrounded by women who understand what you've been through." My final call was to James Morrison, ... Mrs. Hart. "How are you? Did you get the photos I sent?" "I did. Actually, I was wondering about something. Do you still have the recording equipment you used during the shoot? The audio recording?" "Yes, I always record during sessions. It helps me remember which shots the family preferred. I'd like a copy of the recording from our session." "Just the audio, of course. Can I ask why?" "I'm putting together a family scrapbook. I want to remember everything." The lie came easily. I'd been invisible for so long that dishonesty felt like camouflage. Thanksgiving arrived gray and cold, the promise of snow in the air. I spent the morning cooking the way I had for decades. Turkey with Harold's favorite cornbread stuffing, mashed potatoes with real butter, green bean casserole made from scratch. The familiar rhythms of preparation should have been comforting, but instead I felt like I was performing a ritual for the last time. They arrived at 2, arms full of side dishes and wine, talking and laughing as they came through the door. For a moment, watching them hang up their coats and greet each other with hugs, I almost lost my nerve. "Grandma Lily." Sophie ran to me and I lifted her up, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I missed you, sweetheart. I missed you too. Did you make your famous rolls?" "Of course I did." We gathered around the dining room table, the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals. Harold's chair at the head remained empty. I'd never been able to bring myself to sit there. Instead, I took my usual place at the foot, the servant's position, though I'd never thought of it that way until recently. David carved the turkey while Sarah directed the seating arrangements. Emma sat across from me, scrolling through her phone. Tyler and Sophie flanked me on either side, and for a moment I felt the old warmth of family. "This looks incredible, Mom," David said, raising his wine glass. "Thank you for doing this every year." "It's my pleasure," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, it was still my pleasure to feed my family, to gather them around this table, to be the center that held everything together. We ate and talked about school and work and holiday plans. Sarah mentioned that they were thinking of going to her mother's house for Christmas this year. "To change of pace," she said, not looking at me. "That sounds lovely," I said after dinner. While the dishes were being cleared, I excused myself to the kitchen. My hands shook as I retrieved the small digital recorder from the drawer and slipped it into my cardigan pocket. When I returned to the dining room, we were all gathered around the table, looking at Emma's phone. "We got the photos back from the shoot," Emma said, showing them around. They turned out really good. Oh, let me see, Sophie said, climbing onto Emma's lap. I stood in the doorway, watching them scroll through the images. I could see myself in some of them pushed to the edges, partially obscured, looking smaller somehow than I remembered. And then the final shots, the ones without me, the real family photos. These are perfect, Sarah said. We should get them framed, definitely, David agreed. Maybe we can order Christmas cards with one of these. They were so absorbed in the photos that none of them noticed me standing there. I was invisible again, even in my own dining room. I cleared my throat. Actually, before we look at Christmas cards, I have something I'd like to share with all of you. I pulled out the small recorder and set it on the table. 7 faces looked up at me with varying degrees of curiosity and confusion. I've been thinking a lot about family lately, I began, about what makes someone real family and what doesn't. Emma's face flushed. She knew. I wanted to play something for you. It's from our photo shoot last month. I pressed play. James Morrison's voice filled the room. Beautiful. Let's try a few more. Then Emma's voice, clear and unmistakable. Actually, can we try something different? Maybe we could do one without Granny. Just the real family. The silence that followed on the recording was deafening. You could hear Sarah's throat clearing, David's quiet agreement. The shuffle of feet as they rearranged themselves in the present moment. The dining room was equally quiet. Emma stared at the recorder as if it were a snake. I think, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands, that it's time we talked about what real family means. I walked to Harold's chair and sat down for the first time in 3 years. The authority of the position felt strange but right. 40 years ago, your father and I bought this house. We raised our children here, welcomed our grandchildren here, created a home that was always open to anyone who needed it. I've hosted every holiday, every birthday, every celebration. I've been the keeper of traditions, the maker of memories, the one who held everything together. David started to speak, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. Last month, I was asked to step out of my own family portrait so you could take a picture of the real family. I did it. I smiled and stepped aside and let you erase me from the picture. But something changed in that moment. I remembered something your father told me years ago. I reached into my pocket and pulled out Harold's letter. He said I wasn't the frame. I was the picture itself. I unfolded the deed to the house and placed it on the table. This house, these 4 acres, everything you see around you, it's all mine. Your father made sure of that before he died. He also included a clause in his will that protects me from exactly what happened at that photo shoot. Emma's face had gone white. Grandma, according to the terms of your grandfather's will, any heir who publicly disrespects or diminishes me forfeits their claim to any part of the estate. The lawyer says that suggesting I'm not real family in front of witnesses certainly qualifies. The silence stretched like a held breath. Emma, you're no longer in the will. Your share will be redistributed according to my wishes. Mom, David said, his voice shaking, don't you think that's a little extreme? Extreme? I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, this person I'd sacrificed so much for. What's extreme is being made to feel invisible in my own home. What's extreme is being treated like a piece of furniture that can be moved around at will. But we didn't mean, Sarah started. You didn't mean to hurt me. Then why didn't anyone speak up? Why didn't anyone say that what Emma suggested was wrong? No one had an answer. I've made some other decisions as well, I continued. After the new year, I'll be moving to a senior living community. This house will be donated to the Riverside Women's Foundation in your grandfather's name. It will become a transitional home for older women who need a place to start over. You can't do this, David said, standing up. This house belongs to all of us. No, I said quietly. It belongs to me. It always has. You've just been guests here, and guests can be asked to leave. Sophie started to cry. Grandma Lily, Does this mean we can't come here anymore? My heart broke for her, this innocent child caught in the crossfire of adult cruelty. You can always come see me, sweetheart. I'll have a nice apartment with a garden, and you can visit whenever you want. But what about Christmas? Tyler asked. We always do Christmas here. You'll have to make new traditions, I said. It's just like I'm going to. Emma finally found her voice. Grandma, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I was just ... I don't know. I was being stupid. You were being cruel, I corrected. And cruelty has consequences. But you're taking away my inheritance over one stupid comment. I'm taking away your inheritance because you suggested I wasn't real family, in front of everyone, and no one defended me. I looked around the table at these people I'd loved and sacrificed for. It's these people who'd stood by and watched me be erased from their picture. Family isn't about blood, I said. It's about choice. It's about showing up for each other, defending each other, making sure everyone knows they belong. You chose to let me be diminished. So I'm choosing to let you go. David and Sarah exchanged glances. I could see them calculating, trying to figure out how to salvage this, how to get back in my good graces. Mom, David said carefully, maybe. We can work this out, talk through it. We just did talk through it. I played you the recording. You heard what was said. You heard the silence that followed. But family is about forgiveness, Sarah said. About second chances. I've been giving second chances for years, I replied. Every time someone dismissed me or ignored me or treated me like I was in the way, I forgave all of it. But this was different. This was public. This was final. Emma was crying now, ugly tears that made her mascara run. Please, Grandma, I'll do anything. I'll apologize. I'll make it right. How? I asked. How do you make it right? How do you take back the moment when you suggested I wasn't real family? Had no answer. I want you all to leave now, I said. I have things to do. Mom, David started. I said, leave. They gathered their coats and dishes in stunned silence. Sophie clung to me before they left, promising to call me, to visit me, to never forget me. I held her tight and whispered that I loved her, that this wasn't about her, that she would always be my sunshine. After they left, I sat alone in my dining room, surrounded by the detritus of our last family meal. The turkey carcass on the platter, the empty wine glasses, the wrinkled napkins, all of it, evidence of a tradition that had just ended. I should have felt sad. I should have felt guilty. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt free. The next morning, I started packing. 3 months later, I'm sitting in my new apartment at Riverside Gardens, looking out at a small but beautiful garden that I tend with 3 other women who understand what it means to be discarded by family. We call ourselves the Invisible Women, and we meet every morning for coffee and every evening for tea. Margaret. Walsh was right. I am surrounded by women who understand. There's Dorothy, whose children put her in a nursing home and sold her house without telling her. There's Ruth, whose daughter-in-law convinced her son that Ruth was too much work to have around the grandchildren. There's Susan, whose family simply stopped inviting her to gatherings until she got the message and stopped trying to attend. We share our stories, our pain, our hard-won wisdom. If we take care of each other the way families should, if we see each other, really see each other, in a way that feels revolutionary after years of being invisible. I've started a new tradition. Once a month, I host a brunch for all the residents. Not just the Invisible Women, but everyone. We dress up, we make fancy food, we take pictures, lots of pictures. Professional photographs where we're all centered, all valued, all real. My walls are covered with these photographs now. Images of women who remember their worth, who refuse to be pushed to the margins, who've learned that family is something you choose. It's not something you're born into. Sophie calls me every week. Tyler texts me occasionally. David and Sarah have sent cards, apologetic, careful messages that dance around the subject of forgiveness without ever actually addressing what they did wrong. Emma hasn't contacted me at all yesterday. I got a letter from James Morrison. He'd heard about my donation to the Women's Foundation and wanted to offer his services for their fundraising events. He wrote that he'd been thinking about our last photo shoot, that he regretted not speaking up when Emma made her comment. "I've been a family photographer for 20 years," he wrote. "And I've seen too many grandmothers pushed to the edges of their own family portraits. I should have said something. I should have reminded everyone that you were the reason we were all there in the first place. It's too little, too late. But I appreciated the acknowledgement. Last week, I drove past my old house. The Women's Foundation has painted it yellow, Harold. Would have loved that. There's a small garden in the front where some of the residents are growing vegetables. Children's toys scattered across the lawn. The sound of laughter coming from the backyard. It's become what I always hoped it would be. A place where people are seen, valued, protected. A place where no one has to step out of the frame. I think about Emma sometimes. I wonder if she's learned anything from what happened, if she's treating the older women in her life with more respect. I wonder if she misses me, if she regrets what she said, but I don't wonder enough to reach out. Some bridges once burned aren't meant to be rebuilt. I'm 73 years old, and I'm just now learning what it means to be visible. To take up space, to refuse to be edited out of my own story. The other day, Dorothy asked me if I ever regret what I did, if I ever think about taking it all back, welcoming my family home, returning to the way things were. I looked at her, this woman who was thrown away like garbage by the children she raised, and I smiled. "Never," I said. "Not for a single moment." Because here's what I've learned. Being someone's grandmother doesn't mean being their doormat. Being someone's mother doesn't mean accepting their disrespect. Being someone's family doesn't mean letting them treat you like you're invisible. I am not the frame. I am the picture itself. And I am finally worth looking at. The cardinal has found my new bird feeder. Comes every morning, bright red against the gray sky, and stays just long enough for me to notice. Just long enough to remind me that some things are worth seeing, worth feeding, worth making room for. I've learned to make room for myself. I've learned to step into the frame instead of out of it. I've learned that being real, family isn't about blood or tradition or obligation. It's about choice. It's about showing up. It's about making sure everyone knows they belong. My new family knows I belong. They see me. They value me. They would never ask me to step out of the picture. And that, I've discovered, makes all the difference every morning. I brushed my silver hair with the same ivory brush Harold gave me on our wedding day. 100 strokes just like always. A K. But now when I look in the mirror, I see someone different. Someone who takes up space. Someone who matters. Someone who is finally, beautifully, undeniably visible. The frame is mine now. And I'm never stepping out of it again.